The Mario franchise is almost endless when it comes to merchandise. One of the most popular and most iconic Mario products out there are Plushes. Thanks to plush channels and the overall popularity of the franchise, Mario and his friends have so many plushes through their name. Whether they're produced by Banpresto, Dakara, Kelly Toy, Good Stuff, or Sine, the list of Mario plushes are almost endless. But because of how many plushes that the character of Mario has, you might be wondering, what was the first ever Mario plush? Well, it's pretty complicated for many reasons, mainly because of the lack of documentation surrounding the plushes we're going to be looking at in this video. Because of this, there are a few Mario plushes that could be the first. I'll try to explain these plushes as best as I can with the information I've gathered over the years. So let's go back in time into the 1980s and see what Mario plush could be the first. In the modern age, we fans are spoiled with many plushes of our favorite video game heroes. Banjo and Kazooie, Crash Bandicoot, Shantae, Spyro, Sora, Master Chief. We have been getting many plushes of our favorite video game characters over the years, and it's kinda hard to believe that wasn't the case even back when video games became the national phenomenon it is today. A lot of arcade games at the time didn't have a lot of characters, and if they did, they were usually just generic animals, generic humans, or some sort of vehicle. However, that all changed when Pac-Man entered the scene. With the success of the original arcade game, Pac-Man became a household name with tons of merchandise. This is probably thanks to the original Pac-Man having unique characters that were recognizable and marketable. Because of this, there have been many plushes of Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man that were released in North America during the Pac-Man craze of the early 1980s. Because of Pac-Man's unique characters, more arcade games started featuring more iconic and memorable characters similar to Pac-Man. Q*bert, Domino Man, Ryu, Mappy, Taizo Hori, Frogger. This made them the easy target to turn them into marketable icons. You couldn't really market the enemies from Space Invaders or the Pong Paddles compared to, say, Pac-Man and the Ghosts. But despite this, plushes of video game characters were still not very common. There were a few Pac-Man plushes from Commonwealth, a Q*bert plush from Kenner, and while not technically a plush, Namco did produce some Puka inflatables in Japan. Besides that, there were barely any plushes of video game characters at the time. Though when Donkey Kong became another video game phenomenon like Pac-Man, you can bet there was a lot of merchandise for that game, and you'd be correct. The original Donkey Kong arcade game received many collectibles after the game launched. Since it gave Pac-Man a run for its money, Donkey Kong was one of the rare few arcade games to receive plushes. Meet the Etone Donkey Kong plush set from 1982. Not only was this the first ever plush of Donkey Kong, but it's also known to be the first ever plush of any Mario character, as Donkey Kong is technically a Mario character. Etone is a toy company that's not very well known these days, as their items have little to no documentation. They produce many plushes of both generic stuffed animals and officially licensed characters, and many of their plushes were produced around the 70s and 80s. After the big success of Donkey Kong, Nintendo of America licensed their characters to Etone with the goal of producing Donkey Kong plushes to release in retail stores. The only character they ever manufactured and released was Donkey Kong, and they made him in multiple sizes, and even a puppet of him exists. Now back when I first saw this plush, I was never a big fan of it. Maybe it's because of the way his plastic face was put on, maybe it was that giant Donkey Kong logo that's placed on his chest. Either way, I was never a big fan of this plush, but it has been starting to grow on me lately. Anyways, Donkey Kong was the only character from the game that Etone released. You'd think they would have made a Mario or Pauline to go with DK, but they never released any more characters, though that probably wasn't meant to be the case. In February 2016, a Reddit post was created titled 1978, Before Jumpman, Before Mario, What is this thing? As for how this plush was discovered, it was found on the floor at a Goodwill. Nobody really knew what this plush was, at least in the sense of its authenticity. He definitely looks like Mario from the Donkey Kong era, but there was just something off about it. For one thing, Etone only released Donkey Kong. They've never released Mario. Not to mention that while this Mario plush has an Etone touch tag, it's not the same one as DK's touch tag. The year date on Mario's touch tag also reads 1978, which doesn't make sense since the Donkey Kong arcade game released in 1981. Was this just a generic man who just happened to look like Mario? Actually, no. From the current information we gathered, this is a prototype of a Mario plush that Etone produced but never released. That 1978 touch tag was just a placeholder that came from one of Etone's earlier plushes. As for the Mario plush itself, it looks really good for being based off of his design from the Donkey Kong game. It really makes me wonder why Mario never released. It's really disappointing that this plush was never released, given how important of a character Mario is in Donkey Kong. If I had to guess, maybe Nintendo thought he wouldn't sell as well because of his humanish design, which would probably explain why Nintendo approved Donkey Kong but not Mario. There have been some plush sets over the years that have omitted human characters. If there's a franchise out there where a lot of its main characters aren't human, chances are those human characters either have very little plushes or nothing at all. Some characters like Pasquale and Professor Utonium haven't gotten new plushes in a very long time, though there's also characters that currently have no plushes at all. April O'Neil, no plush. Elmira Duff, Montana Max, nothing. Not that these characters never get merchandise or anything, it's just that plush designers don't see the appeal of these characters as marketable plushies, possibly because of their human nature. It's possible that Nintendo felt the same way about Mario at the time, because you have to remember, the Mario franchise up to that point was just Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. His name wouldn't even be on the game's title until Mario Brothers. Again, this is just my speculation as to why Nintendo might have rejected Mario, but approved of Donkey Kong. But even if the reason was true, I don't completely agree with that mindset. I personally believe that any character can have a unique and marketable design, regardless if they're human or not. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit off track. Back to the plush. If there was any plush that I would consider to be the first ever produced Mario plush, it would definitely be this Etone prototype. While it's unfortunate that he never saw mass production, it's still great that this plush even resurfaced at all, especially since prototypes aren't supposed to be in the hands of collectors in the first place, and unless someone who worked on the toy line kept their items in their collection, prototypes are often sent to the factories to be destroyed. But I'm really glad that this Mario survived, though how he ended up at a Goodwill is beyond me. And hey, since Etone released Donkey Kong in multiple sizes, maybe there's prototypes of Mario in different sizes, though I think that's probably unlikely. I'm not sure who owns this plush now, but I heard he has made appearances at a few video game conventions, and he even appeared on eBay for $25,000. Since Etone once planned on releasing Mario in their Donkey Kong plush set, it makes me wonder if Etone ever planned on making other characters. Could you imagine if they plan on releasing a Pauline? She rarely gets any merchandise, so imagine how much an Etone Pauline plush would go for. What about Donkey Kong Jr.? Coleco made a figurine of him, so an Etone Jr. plush wouldn't seem too far-fetched. Actually, there is a print ad featuring Etone's Donkey Kong plush set, which not only featured the unreleased Mario plush, but a third character that was also produced but went unreleased, and that's Donkey Kong Jr. The only remains of this particular ad in question is a photo showing a black and white close-up of the Jr. plush. As of this video's taping, the full print ad featuring Mario and Jr. has yet to resurface. Not only does a prototype Mario exist, but so does a prototype Jr. We found the prototype Mario at a Goodwill, but who knows where that prototype Jr. is. The Donkey Kong era has always fascinated me, not only because I'm a huge fan of the original arcade game, but it's also interesting seeing what the characters were like before they became famous. A video game where Mario's the villain is something we'll never see again. It's always fun looking at the original games as merchandise. Nintendo is always strict when it comes to how their intellectual IP should be represented. Companies with the Mario license have to follow these strict guidelines to make sure Nintendo's characters are represented in a way that the company wants them to. But back in the early 80s, when it was just the Donkey Kong games, all that the toy companies had to work with was the artwork from the arcade cabinets and the flyers advertising the games. Nintendo never really knew what the characters should definitively look like at the time, so seeing these old Nintendo products is always a treat in my book. Now with the prototype Mario plush from Etone, I can comfortably call it the first Mario plush to ever exist. But the thing is, he was never mass produced like Donkey Kong did, so he was never manufactured and released to the public. So if we know what the first produced Mario plush was, what about the first ever released Mario plush? Of course, the Etone Donkey Kong Mario plush never came out, and there was never a Mario plush made for Mario Brothers, which means that the next Mario game to likely ever gotten plushes would be the first game in the Super Mario series, Super Mario Brothers. Given the cultural impact that Super Mario Bros. Gave across Japan and North America, it's possible that there might have been plushes made for the game, and you'd be correct. Mario is now seen as a marketable character, thanks to having a cute redesign and a friendlier personality. Because of this, many pieces of Super Mario Bros. Memorabilia were released shortly after the game launched in Japan and North America. There have been a few Mario plushes released throughout Japan and North America during the release of the original Super Mario Bros., but which Super Mario Bros. Mario plush predates them all? If you're from the United States, you might likely guess the Applause Mario doll from 1989, or the Acme Mario plush from 1988. Sure, these plushes look really odd and pretty awful looking, but they're far from being the first ever Mario plushes. These two Mario plushes shown here have been known to release in Europe. Maybe they were the first plushes? Fat chance. Super Mario Bros. Was released in Europe in 1987. While these plushes could have been released around the same time, they most likely came around 1988 due to most game-specific merchandise at the time releasing a year after the game's launch. And even then, I'm not sure if these guys are really official. But what about Japan? If the Mario plushes we looked at from North America and Europe are not the first, then which Japanese plush could be considered the first released? Well, I found a few Japanese Mario plushes that look like they could have come out shortly after Super Mario Bros. Released. Let's talk about the more lesser known plushes first. While I was doing a Google image search on the Avanti Mario plushes, I found two mysterious Mario plushes, both from sold listings on Yahoo Japan Auction. I have never seen these plushes before, and I doubt any of you have seen them. These are Mario plushes that uses design from the Super Mario Bros. The Great Mission to Rescue Princess Peach OVA film. The film was released in Japanese theaters in the summer of 1986, and later saw a home video release on Betamax and VHS. It's a very unique film to say the least. While the OVA designs stay pretty true to the original source material, there are some differences with Mario's design. While things like his proportions are slightly different, Mario's design in the OVA depicts him with black hair, while in the video game he has brown hair. As for his emblem, it's yellow with a black M in the OVA, while it's white with a red M in the video game. The OVA film wasn't the only time this particular design was used. A few commercials advertising Mario branded food products used this design. Since the design was used outside of the OVA, it doesn't seem as strange to have this design be turned into a marketable plushie. This large Mario you're looking at measures around 20 inches, while this extra large Mario measures around 48 inches. Let's look at the large plush first. He's pretty much in a unique style. This plush clearly uses his design from the OVA, except the M on his yellow emblem is red and not black like it is in the movie. His eyes are made of plastic, and his pupils are also black, even though in the OVA, he had the blue irises like in the video game. The materials used on this plush look pretty decent, except the mustache and eyebrows look like they're made out of a really thin felt material. As for the extra large plush, judging by the plastic eyes and its overall similarities to the other plush, both plushes seem to have been made by the same manufacturer. Despite this, there are some differences compared to the large plush. His proportions are much thicker than the large plush. His plastic eyes are looking towards the left while the large plush is centered. His mustache looks a lot more like Luigi's, unlike the large plush. I wonder if this was like that, or maybe the factory made a mistake. Does this mean that a Luigi plush exists in this style? Who knows? Also, this photo shows that the extra large Mario plush lacks eyebrows, though it's likely he originally had them when he was new. The extra large plush also has a mouth, which is literally just a red circle. And here's the strange part. The extra large Mario plush has a bow tie and a brown cape. I'm not sure if this was just a custom job on the original owner's part, or if it was always like that. If this plush is supposed to have a bow tie and cape, maybe he wore it in the OVA? It's been a very long time since I've seen the OVA, so don't send me any nasty comments if he never wore this in the film. From the pictures I've seen of these plushes, I don't see a touch tag on them, nor any indication of one. Because of this, we don't know which company manufactured these plushes, nor do we know the year date of when they were produced. Heck, I'm not sure if these are even official. Since the film came out in mid-1986, it's possible that these plushes came out around that year. Though since the OVA design was also used in 1987, it's possible that they might have come out around that year. But where were these plushes available at? Given he came in a large and extra large size, and the fact that these plushes look cheaply made, it's possible that these might have been amusement plushes made for carnivals and crane games. And if that's the case, then maybe these Marios came in smaller sizes as well? Maybe there's a Luigi in the set? Unless these plushes ever show up again, we might never get answers. We don't know who manufactured them since they don't appear to have any paper or touch tags. We don't know the year or date of when they might have been released, and overall, the context of these plushes currently remain a mystery. But were they the first ever released Mario plushes? Maybe. But since the OVA came out in mid-1986, it's likely these plushes came out either later that year or 1987. However, there are some Mario plushes that likely came out earlier than the ones we've shown off. Not only are they based off of his video game design, have the original Super Mario Bros. Branding, but we also know more information about these plushes compared to the ones we talked about earlier. And that is the Super Mario Bros. Plush set released by Avanti. While none of the tags on these plushes have a year date on it, a lot of people say that they most likely came out around 1986, and judging by the original Super Mario branding he has, as well as the overall age of these plushes, I personally believe that these were definitely released in 1986, which not only does it likely make them a little older than the two mysterious plushes, but it also makes the Avanti Mario plushes the first Mario plushes to ever be commercially released. Where they were released, I'm not sure, but judging by the material of these plushes as well as their quality control, I believe these were available at Japanese toy stores. Let's take a look at their paper tags, which are attached by a gold string that wrap around Mario's left hand. The paper tag itself reads Family Computer Super Mario Bros., with copyright Nintendo and Avanti Tokyo on the bottom. A profile of Mario is shown in the center, though one thing you'll notice is that the colors of his shirt and overalls are reversed. He wouldn't officially adopt this design until Super Mario Bros. 3, so why his overalls are blue instead of red is beyond me. I doubt these plushes were released when Super Mario Bros. 3 came out, so it's likely the designer of this tag just made a mistake. It's actually pretty common for merchandise to feature artwork of characters with inaccurate colored clothes. In addition to Mario, there's also other characters that appear on the tag, with names and everything. There's Peach, Bowser, a Goomba, a Toad, and a green Koopa Paratroopa. I find it odd that other characters appear on the paper tag, despite the fact that Avanti only made Mario. This set is actually pretty similar to the Donkey Kong plush set that Etone released, mainly because both plush sets only feature the main character in multiple sizes and variants, and were both available at toy stores. It still makes me wonder if Avanti ever planned on releasing a Peach or something. As for the Mario plushes themselves, there are 3 sizes that Avanti produced: the small 10-inch, the medium 15-inch, and the large 20-inch. They also made variants of all 3 sizes. There's ones that are standing, and ones that are sitting. I currently own the small standing Mario and the medium sitting Mario. I got both plushes for a pretty decent price. They're not tagged or anything, but they're still in pretty good shape considering their age. Maybe someday I'll go for the large Mario, but I'm happy with the 2 plushes that I own. Let's focus on the small Mario for a little bit. The one that I have is the standing variant, but there's also ones released in the sitting position, and even ones with suction cups. One thing that's interesting about the suction cup variant is that his head is looking to the right, while the standing ones are looking forward. One key difference between the small plush and its larger counterparts is that the small plush's overall straps are not separate. The medium and large plushes have separate overall straps. The larger plushes have the touch tag located on the side, while the small plush's touch tag is located on his butt. Since I'm going to be praising these plushes a lot, it's probably best to talk about the negatives first. While the quality control is pretty good, it's not the greatest. For example, my medium Mario's nose is a bit misstuffed. Also, the eyebrows are made of a thin felt material, meaning that if the glue has dried up from being so old, the eyebrows could potentially fall off. I've seen many Avanti Marios with missing eyebrows, so if you're on the lookout for these plushes, make sure the eyebrows are still intact. Though the biggest problem I have with these plushes would be their hats. Most Mario plushes today usually put some stuffing in their hats, so the hats can stay on properly. However, since these plushes don't have any stuffing in their hats, and the way some of them are stitched to the head, the hats often get folded forwards. I've seen a lot of Avanti Marios that have this problem, and while it's present on every size, it seems to be a bigger problem on the large plush. But anyways, let's go more into detail on these plushes. His skin, hair, and clothes are made out of this fuzzy material. I think they pulled it off really well, since the material they use is not overly fuzzy. His hat, while not stuffed, looks pretty good for the most part, and his emblem, which has an embroidered M on it, is simply glued on. His eyes are made of plastic, and they have the blue irises that Mario is known for. Though there is a picture out there of a medium Mario with different eyes. Could this be an earlier release? His nose is pretty big and round, and his mustache looks really good. He has an open mouth, which is something that you don't see on Mario plushes these days. It looks pretty good, and I like how he even has teeth. My small Mario's teeth are a little yellowed, but my medium Mario's teeth are fine. His buttons are hard plastic, but they seem to be flocked. His shoes unfortunately don't have any sole details, but that's okay. His hands are my least favorite part about this plush though. For one thing, his glove cuffs are easily removable, which means they could likely get lost. Also, not to mention that the material might not be that strong, as I've seen many Marios with damaged hands. The touch tag reads Super Mario Bros. Copyright Nintendo on the front, and on the back it says Avanti, product of Korea. It's very crazy how these plushes accurately capture Mario's likeness. Of course, the larger they get, the nicer they look. Regardless, it's amazing how great these plushes actually are. The materials are pretty good quality, the likeness is spot on, and they even got the colors right. Most Mario merchandise outside of Japan normally depict Mario with black hair. While he did have black hair in some of the earlier games, Super Mario Bros. Was the first game, artwork-wise, to feature Mario with brown hair. So the fact that these plushes use the correct brown hair color is great. Also, consider the fact that these plushes came out in a time where Mario plushes didn't really look quite as good as they should have been. Given how amazing the Avanti Mario plushes are, it's crazy to think that they predated all those strange looking Mario plushes by a few years. So yeah, the Avanti Mario plushes look amazing and they still hold up very well in my opinion. And to think that these were the first ever released Mario plushes is pretty impressive. But if you want to get one nowadays, what is their rarity? Well, these plushes are pretty rare. They're not the easiest to find on Japanese secondhand sites, but they do show up on eBay from time to time. However, despite being rare, there's not a lot of demand for these plushes. Since there have been many Mario plushes over the years, it's understandable why Avanti's plushes aren't as in much demand. 1, they're pretty rare. 2, they weren't available in UFO catchers. 3, they weren't used by popular plush tubers. But even if they're not in much demand, these plushes are far from being cheap. Now, don't take these prices as fact. This is just my speculation on what I feel like these plushes are worth. Prices on these plushes vary depending on the sizes and condition. But here's what I think these plushes are worth. Not counting all the variants, the condition, or whether or not it's tagged, the small Mario plush is most likely worth around $70 to $90. As for the medium Mario plush, he's more likely to cost you around $80 to $100. As for the large plush, I'd say he's worth around $110 to $200. You could get lucky and find one for very cheap, but that rarely happens. For being one of the earliest released Mario plushes, and for being such a really old plush in general, I'd say these are decent prices. Fun fact, the Avanti Mario plushes have appeared on many Nintendo related media throughout the 90s. Some of these plushes can be seen in a few photos of Mario creator Shigeru Miyamoto, whether Miyamoto is holding the plush or if the plush is on display in the background. In a French Nintendo documentary, Miyamoto has a medium plush on display in his office. I wonder if he still has his plush. In Super Mario Bros. Deluxe for the Game Boy Color, a Game Boy camera photo can be seen depicting the Avanti Mario plush wearing sunglasses. There were also some promotional images of the cast from the infamous live-action Mario movie taking a photo with the large Avanti Mario plush. Here's one with Dennis Hopper, who played President Koopa in the movie. Here's also one with Samantha Mathis, who played Daisy in the movie. There's also a photo of the film's directors, Rocky Morton and Annabelle Jankel, holding that same plush. And finally, here's another photo of the plush being carried by special effects artist Chris F. Woods. One thing I noticed about this plush in these photos is that his emblem is different compared to the actual plush. Could this one be a prototype? Or maybe some obscure release? I'm not sure. Fun fact, the pattern of the Avanti plushes were later copied by a toy company named Sun Arrow. In the early 90s, Sun Arrow released a Super Mario World plush set in Europe. While they're widely known for their highly sought after Yoshi plushes, they released 2 versions of Mario, one in his classic colors, which he didn't wear in Super Mario World, and the other one in his current colors, which he did wear in Super Mario World. The plush pattern on the Sun Arrow Mario plushes look almost identical to the Avanti plushes. But there is one big noticeable difference between the 2 plushes, besides having different paper and touch tags, and that the Sun Arrow plushes have 4 fingers. Now Mario is a 5-fingered character, and the Avanti plushes have the correct 5 fingers. So why Sun Arrow gave him 4 fingers is kinda strange. There's also the set of Mario plushes released by EM Entertainment in 1992 exclusively in Germany. Both plushes are clearly based on the Avanti and Sun Arrow plushes. At least they bothered to give Mario the correct 5 fingers, unlike Sun Arrow's 4. Anyways, back to Avanti. So in conclusion, are these the first ever released Mario plushes? Personally, I think they are. Regardless of whether or not these were the first released plushes, there's no denying that the Avanti Mario plushes were way ahead of their time. Think about it, they came out in a time where plushes of video game characters weren't really much of a thing, especially accurate looking ones. The trend of making plushes of video game characters would become more popular around the 90s, when many arcade and toy companies started releasing video game tie-in plushes for their UFO catchers, though there were still some video game plushes released at retail. And by the 2000s and 2010s, the popularity of video game plushes started to become more and more prevalent. And I think we all owe it to the Avanti Mario plushes. Without these plushes, we probably wouldn't have any of the video game plushes we have today. Soap Shoe Sonic probably wouldn't even exist if it was for Avanti Mario. Given how old these plushes are, and not to mention their connection to one of the most famous video games ever created, the Avanti Super Mario Bros. Plushes are really special to me. They were from a time when video game plushes were not as common as they are now, as well as the time where Mario merchandise had inconsistent character designs. Super Mario Bros. Really showed the potential of how video game characters can become merchandisable, especially in plush form. and the Avanti Mario plushes really capture Mario's design from the game really well. While they aren't the most wanted or most iconic plushes in the Mario merchandise community, the legacy of Avanti's Super Mario Bros. Plush set will live on in the hearts of those who grew up playing with him and those who have him in their collection. God bless Avanti Mario. So what was the first ever Mario plush? Well, it's kind of a broad statement, to be honest. The prototype Mario plush from Etone's Donkey Kong plush set was the first Mario plush to ever exist, but he was never officially released to the public. What about the first ever Mario plush that was released? Chances are it's most likely the Mario plushes from Avanti's Super Mario Bros. Plush set. As for those mysterious plushes, they could have either came out around the time as Avanti's plushes or shortly after. I hope this video explains the question and made you learn something new. As a Mario collector, these plushes looked very interesting and have so much charm. Avanti's Mario plushes are plushes that I will always cherish given their age, rarity, and their overall greatness. Also, if the current owner of the Etone Mario prototype plush is watching this, I really hope you're taking great care of such a treasure. Something this historical deserves to be preserved forever, and I hope this plush is well kept for many years to come. Mario is one of my all-time favorite characters, and the Mario franchise is one of my favorite franchises to collect plushes for. So finding some of the earliest plushes of the character means so much to me, and with the Mario plushes from Super Nintendo World, it makes me really hope that Mario plushes will evolve in the next foreseeable future.